Wesam is a really cool dude. I've interviewed him, and a bit of background about this guy. He's had an exit before, like he's built a product-based business called TradeDash, where they basically it was like a financial product, like a crypto financial product, and it's really cool that he managed to build that as an. I guess you could call him an indie hacker since they didn't raise any money, and then they sold it and they got a good exit from that. It was really interesting, and he tells a little bit about that story in the podcast today. We also talk a lot about the differences between the U.S. market and the EU market. It gets a bit political, so maybe you want to skip past the first part of our interview, the first like 30, 40 minutes, if you're not into that. But we also talk about the business side of things, how to grow a consulting shop or how to grow a product. We also talk about how VC money works, which is it's a very interesting dynamic, which you kind of don't realize unless somebody kind of points it out to you, and then you're like, aha, actually it makes sense that it's like that. So we talk about the dynamics of VC money and how that can influence your startup, or how you can actually use that to your advantage if you're trying to target startups, which is a thing that I've talked about before in my interviews. Quite an interesting podcast. Give it a watch. Go. So before we started recording, we were talking about like the huge difference between the European market and the US market. How I recently talked to a Stripe recruiter, and a little funny story of how she offered 300,000, and I was like, wow, 300,000, this is actually good. And then she was like, yeah, but in Romanian currency, and I was like, oh my god. And so it's very interesting that, as you said, there is something that just in the economy of like Europe, where we don't get the same salaries as our you know co-workers and friends overseas in the US, and on top of it we also have higher taxes usually. And I wonder what like Europeans are on the subject, because I honestly can't make heads or tails of it. I don't know why the fuck.
Um, well, I mean, the subject is too broad. We can talk about it from 100 different perspectives, be it from tax perspective, corporate structures, employment rights, and but let's take a couple of examples in Europe just to sort of get the ball rolling on the conversation. So, if you think about it, let's take a little bit of a. I mean, this is not going to be an accurate historical account, but it's somewhat
Yeah.
of a reasonable approximation. Take something along the lines of, say, Sweden. In the 70s and 80s, socialism was pretty strong in Sweden. The country was on the verge of bankruptcy.
Oh, wow.
So the political class decided to reorient. I mean, Sweden is just an example. You can take any European country, you're going to find similar sort of streak of policies that were put in place, where the political classics influence Sweden decided in the 90s to devalue their currency quite significantly in order to not go bankrupt, deregulate, open up the market a little bit more. And, sort of a lot of capital came in, a lot of huge investments came in, created an optimistic work environment for both people that wanted to elevate their own living standard. Like if you were educated in the 90s, you had a good career, you had good
Okay.
prospects. So what ended up happening is there was a lot of building period until 2000, 2001 when the dot-com boom happened. It basically was a finance boom. It wasn't a tech boom. I mean,
Yeah.
Amazon, I mean, it was a financial issue. It wasn't a tech issue at the time.
Yeah.
So I mean, just to give you an example, just to tie it back to the question earlier, is that Sweden was at the forefront, for example, of all broadband networks across the globe. I mean,
Really?
for example, we
I mean, yeah,
had
you have Nokia.
Nokia is, I think, Finnish. We had Ericsson, but that's not it.
Okay.
We had in my apartment, we had fiber optic network, 100 megabit per second. When everybody was sitting on ADSL by 2000, I think it was 2001 or 2002. We were at
Right.
the forefront of technological infrastructure to such a large sort of degree that but we fumbled it. We basically did not invest in it, did not invest in our structure. Why? Because when the dot-com boom happened, the political class got afraid. Look, there's a lot of instability that comes along with all these big market swings. Let's tone it down. Let's hamper it with regulation. Let's hamper it with a lot of requirements. So what ended up happening is that a company would ask itself, why the hell should I
Yeah.
invest in a country like Sweden? I mean, when the regulatory structure is not helpful, capital doesn't flow in.
Yeah.
Additionally, worker right is extremely like it's not just in Sweden, be it Germany
Oh
or
yeah.
France or you name it, any Western European country have so much regulations on the part of the employer that employing people is very difficult. Firing people is very difficult.
Oh
Making
yeah.
sure. I mean, an employee in the US gets paid more, yeah, but they also work longer hours. In general, I would argue from my experience, they also produce net production more in
Fair.
terms of productivity.
The thing is, the problem that I think is that, like, I'm from Romania. I've worked with European companies and
Yeah,
recently mostly US companies because it just makes more sense. I've always been a contractor, whether with European or
yeah,
US companies. So even though I get the same kind of salary in Europe that I would get as an employee or similar, whatever, much lower than the US, I don't get all of those workers' rights. The companies nowadays, even though they argue, hey, we have
yeah.
regulation, and there is a lot of regulation even outside of employing people, true, given. It's still like I get a lower salary for no real benefit. I'm still a contractor. I can get kicked out tomorrow,
Yeah.
which I
And
don't. I'm not bothered by it.
but they do it for a reason, Alex. Like, okay, put yourself in their position. Do you want to go and hire a bunch of employees that you either can't fire or basically can take? For example, here, if I hire, I mean, this is gonna sound sexist, but it has nothing to do with females in general. But if I go hire a female worker. She gets pregnant. She can take maternity leave for an
Yeah,
extended period of time at the company. The company is now without an employee. I have to go find the replacement for the duration
yeah,
she's gone. I'm not saying this is wrong to have these social sort of safety nets, but it incurs a burden on the company. So they start to think,
true,
well, should we really then hire full-time employees? Let us hire contractors instead and
fair,
get rid of all this overhead, legal overhead, basically.
fair.
They,
No, I agree.
I mean, from their perspective, it makes sense. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm not saying whether the actual regulation is right or wrong. It's just like it makes sense from a financial perspective for them to do that.
I fully agree, and I would also do the same thing because, especially when you hire cross border, a
Yeah,
lot of problems with where do you pay social security, where do you pay taxes.
exactly.
If you hire me as a contractor, I take care of my own taxes, and you have no burden, no legal burden, no. It makes things a lot easier, and this is what I always put.
100%.
Yeah, yeah, I know it is a lot better. It's also a lot better for me as well because I get control over how I get taxed. I like it more personally.
Pretty much. I mean, I'm not saying that contractor work is bad, but it creates a problem in that Um, employees in general, what an average person wants in their life more than anything is predictability. You want to have a, say, a
Yeah,
20, 30-year long plan. Say, I'm going to work here. I'm going to make a ton of money. I'm going to buy a house. I'm going to have a family, have some kids. When you're on contract work, everything is temporary. Nothing is permanent a lot of times. So the structure of the gig economy, so to speak, is that you end up hopping from place to place without any sense of permanence, which creates a lot of instability in terms of future planning on the part of
yeah,
employees
yeah.
and sovereigns in general. So it's not an easy problem to tackle. I don't know what the right solution is, but I can tell you from experience that I work a lot with not venture capital firm, angel investors for the most part. I
Okay.
do technical due diligence on companies before they invest in them.
Okay.
And I can see this clear as day. Like when I look at an investment for a particular angel investor and they ask me, hey, can you do technical due diligence on this company? I sit and talk to the founders and people in that company. And most often these concerns come up. Like it's not easy for companies to invest in Europe, mainly because there is this big hurdle and this big regulatory burden they need to deal with. And it's just not easy.
Like even equity is a lot harder in Europe in terms of
Yeah.
how, like, in the US you have safes and all sorts of other things which are, already battle
Yeah.
tested. It's very easy to invest in a company and get equity for it. On the other side, if you wanted to, like, incentivize employees with equity, it's a lot easier in the US than it is in
Pretty
Europe.
much.
Like, I remember when I worked at Tucon, which was incorporated in Switzerland, it was a huge mess figuring out how we were going to
Yeah.
get our options, and I literally had to spend like a week reading like documents and stuff to figure
Where do
out.
you tax the options on the capital?
Yeah,
Any capital gains? Where do you tax it? Your residency place, the place where the company is right? Like there is a lot of
yeah, no,
legal
there's a lot of
overhead.
stuff.
And
Whereas in the US, there's frameworks for that, and people are
yeah,
used to that.
exactly. I mean, this is one of the main reasons, one of the few reasons, not the main reasons, but the few reasons that we don't have any unicorns in Europe, for example. We don't have
Yeah.
any large tech companies here. I mean, it's kind of mind baffling to me that we're at the forefront of infrastructure 2001. By 2008, the US has a bunch of
Yeah.
unicorns. Europe barely has any. And any time a European company manages to scale up in size and they start encountering these hurdles, what do? They move to the US. Take Spotify as an example. They just
Yeah.
move there because it's impossible to operate here, legally speaking, in a reasonable manner, especially when you have to deal with 50 different jurisdictions and rule
Yeah, yeah,
sets.
yeah, yeah. And even things as simple as opening a company in some countries in Europe, like Germany, you
Mhm.
have to spend like 5 or 10 or even 15,000 euro. I've heard, which is like $18,000 or
It's
something like that,
bizarre.
and it takes you weeks. I mean, I can literally open a company in the US right now with like $200 on a website, and I'll
Yeah.
have it in a week if I wanted to. I can open an
Yeah.
LLC just like that.
When I opened an AB, which is the equivalent, say, of an LLC here in Sweden, it took me months, a bunch of legal work and headache because you have to submit this paper and that paper, and you have to wait for this number and that number. And what about your VAT and your tax? And
Oh yeah,
you know, like we have a startup here. We're trying to get something off the ground. Having to deal
yeah,
with all that, why would I do that? I'll just open a company online from the US or some other jurisdiction that is a lot more
yeah.
friendly to
Taxes are
capital.
also super friendly. I was surprised to find out how friendly taxes are for foreigners if you open a US company. So, like, if you open a US LLC, I don't know if you know, but like
I
in
had
Wyoming,
an
Delaware,
yeah.
it's a pass through now, and you don't actually get taxed in the US.
Well, I mean, the US distinguishes very strictly between sort of capital gains, sort of corporate income, and individual, basically all countries do that more or less.
Yeah.
The problem you have in Europe is that we have heavy taxation on income.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean,
Super
look,
heavy.
taxes in the US are not low. I mean, depending on your state. If you're in
No.
California,
Oh, go
I
ahead.
was, my company was in California. When we sold the company in 2018, all in all, if you consider everything, I ended up paying 40% tax, even though I had not set my foot was not even in California throughout the period where the company operated.
Wow.
All in all, because the income was calculated, if you calculate withholding and all that, roughly approximately 40%. So, I mean, it's not, depends on your jurisdiction in the US also. Like if you were
Yeah.
registered in Delaware, it's vastly different than if you're registered in California.
100%. California is more socialist and more tax heavy than the other
It's
other.
very tax heavy state, and this was the mistake on our end when we incorporated. But it was the easiest for us, so we just did it without thinking about the tax implications ahead
Yeah.
of time, mainly because of
Yeah.
time pressure. But
Uh, I looked at Wyoming mostly because it seems like it's the best for LLCs and for people that are not necessarily trying to raise money, but just trying to contract or indie hack or
yeah,
whatever. And like from what I understood so far, and I talked to a few accountants, I talked to a few lawyers, and maybe it's not exactly true, so don't quote me on it. But
I mean,
yeah, if you don't live in the US and if your income is not considered effectively connected to the US, so what the way I understand that is if you only have one client and that client is in the US, then they will tax you to some degree. But if you have clients in the US and in Europe and in the whole world, then that's not effectively connected. Or if you hire somebody in the US, again, now you're taxed. But if you don't
hmm.
hire anybody in the US, now you're also good. But
Yeah, I'm not
even
an expert on tax law. I mean, you may be right about this. I mean, I don't have factual. I mean, we let our accountants do all that kind of work
yeah,
for us. It's
same.
not a topic I'm well versed in. But in general, the problem for me is not actually taxes or regulation. For the most part, is the way capital is handled in Europe. That is actually pretty significantly. Like if I have $1 million, say dollars today, and I wanted to
Okay.
invest it in Europe. A significant portion of that $1 million will not go to investment, will go to scaffolding to enable me to make an investment. A significant portion of that will go to legal fees and
Yeah.
taxation and not taxation, but basically accounting. And you have to figure out how to do things properly in Europe, which is a cost. And now, once you get to a certain degree or level, you can take on that cost. You can hire an accountant that sits for you and does that. So if you're an investor, you can make it work. I'm not saying you can't make it work.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can. But also at the same time, you ask yourself, well, why should I do it here? Why not do it in the US? If I have that $1 million, why would I invest it in Europe, a place where I get much less investment or much less return on my money than in the US? At the same time, I put up with these hurdles. Why would I do that? The
Yeah.
opportunity cost is the issue.
It's a real opportunity cost, and it's the same if you're looking like at the contracting and finding work. Like regardless of how you look at, like Europe is kind of economically, I don't even how to frame it, but it's just not in the same places as the US economically, not even
Look, let's
close.
be honest about it. Europe is bankrupt at its core. It's bankrupt.
Exactly.
Like that is the look. We fought World War II in Europe, did the whole EU thing in order to have non-German Germany not steer the entirety of Europe. What did we end up doing? Deliver everything on a silver plate to the German economy. So
Oh
now the
yeah.
German economy is in charge of Europe's economy, more or less. So now you have to fit all these different European structures into within the confinement of what works for the German economy. I mean, these structures are not designed in a sane and useful way to facilitate and enable good investments or good trade, at least from my perspective, from where I sit, from the deals I have observed over the years.
The way I see it, also in Europe is kind of a dying place when it comes to the economy of the country. I don't really want to say it, but that's just how I actually feel. That's the gut feeling I get.
It's not just you, man. There is a sense of pessimism in everyone I talk to. It's not just you. The truth is, Europe needs some changes. Honestly,
Yeah,
like that's
we we have just like the US. We also have presidential elections this year in Romania, and I've never actually voted. But this year, it's the first year and possibly the last I'm gonna actually vote. Because there is this one president. She's a woman, so I don't not that's not why I vote for her, but
no
she
caveats needed.
is out of six candidates or however many they are. She is the only person that talks about cutting taxes to stimulate the economy. Everyone else talks about just crap. They talk about LGBT, or they talk about, oh, the family, or like literally the guy who has the biggest numbers in the polls is this guy who he didn't even finish high school. He is a complete dumbass, and one of the things he said is, oh yeah, Romania, I think Romania is going in a good direction. We have higher prices for everything. The economy is fucked and taxes are going up. How is that
I
a
mean,
good direction?
inflation everywhere is a phenomenon. It's not just in Romania, right? It's across
True, true.
globally. Yeah.
But I think there are countries that are dealing with it better.
I agree. I mean, obviously that is the case. Yeah.
Yeah.
The issue I have is that most politics today talk about social issues and they
Yeah.
don't talk about
Exactly.
economic issues or like
Exactly.
stability issues, predictability issues. They don't have politicians and the political class don't have a 30-year plan for the country. They have a 4-year plan until the next election. And you get temporary structures instead of permanent long-term fixes to systemic issues that exist within the confinement of the country.
It's
That's most politics today, almost everywhere across the West.
it's 100% the issue. Most of them, they talk about social issues. None of them talk about the economic issues. And I, for one, believe that if you fix the economy, you fixed everything. Because the only reason why your life, like usually if somebody tells me their life sucks, usually it can be fixed by more money.
Money, yeah.
Usually it can be fixed by more money.
Yeah, usually that is true. And yeah, I mean, eh, let's be honest. The political class does not understand. Like, how many of the political class, say candidates in general, have started a company? How many of them have been employers? I mean, they,
Yeah,
they don't have that experience and that understanding of what it takes to build a business, grow it, sell it, deal with the headaches and legislations and sort of red tape. That's not what they're there for. So, like, there is something sinister about what's going on, especially in Europe. I mean, the U.S. is also a clusterfuck. Don't get me
Oh
wrong. I
yeah,
mean,
oh yeah, no, 100%.
there is no place right now globally that is sane. Everybody's insane, but they're insane to different degrees.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
There are some places that are less insane, but they're still insane.
The thing with the US is even if it's insane, you can at least make money.
True.
Like, then to me, that's like, okay, be as insane as you want, but like ultimately, like you can avoid the insanity. You can go into a specific neighborhood, you can have your own little bubble of friends, and you can avoid a lot of the insanity to some degree. There, like, obviously there's a lot of unsafe, like not safe places in the US, but there's also safe
Everywhere.
places in the US. I can't, you know, think that there aren't safe, nice places. And also London is not safe either.
No, I
Paris.
mean, when I was in London, I did not feel safe personally, and that was, years ago. I did not feel safe at all. I mean, London is a shit show. Like, honestly,
Oh yeah.
I was this. That was not a European city. That was not a European capital I was in. That was some third world. And
100.
I again, I told you this at the start of our conversation. I've been to the third world, and I mean, I've seen it. When I compare it to London, I see no difference. it,
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
bizarre to me how Europe has deteriorated to such an extent. I heard a really cool quote a while ago. It was something along the lines of Europe is right now nothing more than a museum. Basically, it lives off of its
Yeah,
past glories. People go there to, oh, look at the cool buildings. It's like when you
yeah,
go to a museum, look at the cool painting. But like, there
yeah.
is nothing actually happening here that is exciting, that gives you any sense of hope. There is no structure that enables you to sort of flourish and grow and provide for your family and immediate community. The social structures in Europe are completely out of order.
Entirely so, and they are also very presumptuous about it. I talked to certain European friends of mine about the United Arab Emirates, about Dubai.
Hmm.
Been there multiple times now. It's a beautiful place. It's safe. It's clean. It is more expensive in Eastern Europe, but it's not more expensive in London. It's not more expensive in New York. Uh, yeah, it's hot as fuck. I'm not gonna live there precisely because
Oh,
of
I
that.
like that. I'm okay with that. I like it.
Well, try it. I think you're gonna
I
like
like it.
it.
Yeah.
And it's true that there are a lot of immigrants who obviously don't live, you know, the high life of Dubai. But that's the same in London. It's the same in
Yeah.
New York. Immigrants, like I know Romanians who went to Germany, who went to Spain, who went to Italy, who went to London, and they live the same life as the immigrants that go to Dubai. It's like it's just the way literally all of the world works. Like there's no escaping it. And it's not fortunate. I don't like it either, but it kind of is what it is. And they feel like the Europeans guys who complain about Dubai having no soul and Dubai exploiting immigrants. I'm like, why doesn't it have a soul? Because it's safe and clean. How is it exploiting immigrants, but you're not exploiting immigrants? When I see literal, like I have aunts who have been exploited by London, by Berlin, by whatever.
I mean, London in particular, and even I lived in Berlin for about a year's time. I was in London for about a year. Those were not the cities you think they are. Like, when you hear about London, it's a financial hub of Europe.
Oh
When you hear
yeah,
about Germany, it's the Berlin is the center of tech in Europe. Man, it was bizarre to me when I was in Berlin how bad English literacy was. For example,
oh
you're
yeah.
not well integrated into the global economy. When I was in London, it was bizarre to me how unclean and how just completely unsafe it felt. These are not the hallmarks of good economies. I mean,
Yeah.
there is something fundamentally rotten about the way we're doing things in Europe that I don't think is fixable without massive structural changes. Both, and mostly it's mostly an economic issue. Like, I agree with you. Most of the problems fundamentally come from unsound economic,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, presuppositions, and then if you build on top of that, you end up in a shit show. Like inflation as a problem, for an example, it's a
It's a
central bank's issue. No one talks about that.
nobody.
if you want
literally.
to, yeah, if you don't want to talk about trade deficits or debts or what any of these issues, political candidates don't talk about that. We have massive problems, and I don't see anyone anywhere that is taking them seriously. Personally, I think everyone is just putting their head in the sand and
Yeah,
hoping things
that's
get better on their own.
that's exactly what happens. I think it's ultimately an educational problem because really, I mean, you can shit on politicians all you want, and I like shitting on them too.
Who
Um,
doesn't?
but like the politicians ultimately will say whatever gets them voted.
Yeah.
So if the people would be more financially literate and more economically literate and they would care about these things, I'm hoping that over a long enough time period, politicians would also go in that directions.
Look, let's be honest, Alex. How hard are some of these problems? Not all of them, but some of them to fix. Like, take a country like Sweden, for example, just because I'm familiar with it. Half of
Yeah.
our problems are fixable within 24 hours. Like,
Um,
crime should not be an issue, as an example. Crime should not be an issue. That is fixable within 24 hours if you really wanted to fix it. Like,
yeah,
these are
policy
not,
wise.
they're not difficult problems to fix. It's just that there is an unwillingness to fix them because the hope is they're going to fix themselves on their own.
Yeah.
That is not the right attitude to have if you want to have a prosperous society. Like,
This
and I,
is something
yeah,
which you also see in the workplace. A certain, like when you compare European workers with US workers, there's a certain lethargy to Europeans, and the US people are like, yeah, let's just go and let's just do it, and let's
yeah,
do that as well, and
there's a
let's just
go-getter attitude.
yeah, and it can lead to burnout. I'm not saying it's
Yeah,
perfect,
of
but
course.
it also leads to achievements.
I mean, the achievements are always on the extremes. Like if you have a normal distribution curve, the thing you look up to are always the things at the extreme end of the distribution curve, right? And those happen when a lot of people try extremely difficult things. Some of them succeed, most of them fail. The problem we have in Europe is that we've compressed that distribution curve
Yeah,
where everybody is in the middle
yeah,
and no one is allowed to stick out all the way out to the extreme end of the distribution. You can't get too poor and you can't get too rich. And
yeah,
intuitively, that sounds, like a more egalitarian, more equal society, more reasonable society. The problem it brings with it is that, well, we are reliant, for example, in Europe now, on the US for almost all of our tech import, for example, not just software. I'm talking tech in general. We're
yeah,
reliant on semiconductor manufacturings from the East, TSMC,
yeah,
whatever. I mean, these are problems that we should solve for locally.
as well.
Why
Yeah,
are we offshoring that problem solving in order to compress the distribution curve locally? It seems to
yeah,
me like we
yeah.
have a mismatch, priorities mismatch, where we're trying to do one thing, but in order to deal with the fallouts of it, we have to import the solutions from outside.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There is something not correct about this dynamic that needs to be fixed.
The when you said that in the US things are more extreme and in Europe things are more compressed, you can't get too low, but you can't get too high. I like that a lot, and I agree fully with it. And it made me think of this. It's just, it might be a fake story, but it exemplifies it well. There was this professor in the university who was teaching the kids about communism, and so he's like, "Okay, I'm going to teach you what communism is. Tomorrow, we're going to take a test, and we're going to average the grade from everything you guys did, and everybody's going to get the same grade." So he does that once, and some people study well and they get an A, and some people get a C, and they all get a B now. And
Yeah.
everybody's kind of like, okay, it's not that bad. But before you know it, the guy who gets an A thinks, why the fuck am I working so hard if I'm going to get a
There is no
B anyway?
incentive.
you know and
So I should
now
do.
he gets a B, and the guy who gets the B also thinks, why am I going to work so hard? And he gets a C, and the guy who gets a C gets a C or whatever, and now the average is lower because you never incentivized anybody. And that's exactly what happens in communism. Romania used to be a communism like country. I know stories from my like parents and from my grandparents. And that's exactly what happens. Everybody has a job. Everybody is not necessarily broke, but nobody
Is
wants
well
to.
off. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody's well off, and nobody wants to build stuff.
I mean, the sort of tragedy of the commons, right? Like if you're going to share, the problem is that people don't work in order to provide for. I don't work to provide for everyone. I work to provide for myself, for my family. I mean, that's just
Yeah,
the true nature of you
yeah,
work to provide for your tribe. The problem we have is that we have abstracted the notion of the tribe all the way up to the national states. Now
yeah,
everyone in the company is part of everyone in the country is part of your tribe. Humans don't work like that. I can't think of everyone's names and faces in society. I
yeah,
have
yeah,
my family members, kids, parents, grandparents. Those are the people I can
yeah,
take care of and provide for. And when there is no path for me to provide for them more than the bare minimum, why do I work hard? Why should I work hard? And
yeah,
this is
yeah.
a
No,
philosophical difference between Europeans and Americans, basically, which tells you a lot about the culturally why America is more successful in general than Europe. But there is also a lot of sort of economic fundamental issues in Europe, be it from production to manufacturing to what like we've dropped the ball on a lot of issues in Europe,
yeah,
and
yeah.
they
Do you
hopefully
think?
they're gonna get resolved. But yeah.
Are you optimistic, or would you say, you know what, just go work with the U.S. It's easier?
I mean, I know our conversations sort of go in the pessimistic way, and I hate this, for a recorded conversation to go pessimistic because you want to leave whoever listens with a sort of sense of
Yeah,
optimism. The problem is, if you asked me 10 years ago, I was the most optimistic person on planet Earth. I was, I grew up on the ideas of, be it the Matrix or whatnot. We're going to have a singularity, not, in the
yeah,
dystopian Matrix sense, but to me, like we're going to have an amazing period ahead of us. But it got jarring to me in 2012 when I started 2011, 2012, when I started seeing clearly to me that this is not the path we're headed down. There
yeah.
is something fundamentally rotten about the way we think about things. So, am I optimistic? Not in the short term, not at all, honestly.
I
That is
agree.
the truth. But the thing is, half the things I'm pessimistic about are solvable within 24 hours if we actually were serious about solving them.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I agree.
Like,
Like
they're not difficult problems.
most of the things, like even stimulating the economy. Okay, fire out people who are not efficient from the budget. Now you have a budget surplus. Cut the taxes. Boom.
You know what? Don't even stimulate the economy. Just don't fuck with it.
Or
Don't
or at least
hamper it.
that.
That's enough. I mean, don't
Yeah.
stimulate it. I'm not asking you to go and give everybody checks so they go out and spend and you have economic
Oh yeah.
stimulus.
So when I say stimulate, I'm thinking more in terms of cut the taxes, stop putting weird rules on me. That's what I think is
You know
stimulation.
what? Keep the taxes high. Just don't hamper it more than it already is hampered. You've done a
Yeah.
bad job. Don't do even worse. That's all I ask for, and even that we seem to be unable to do.
Yeah. No, it's true.
From my
That's the thing
perspective,
for Romania. For the past 5 years, they've been consistently raising taxes, and they are now want to raise them some more. But go ahead, because I interrupted you.
no, it's fine. I mean, it's just two guys having a conversation, like I said earlier. The issue I have is that if you look at the US debt as an example, I mean, you can Google these numbers, it takes you 5 seconds. Look at the total US debt and look at the total M1, M2, or M3 money supply globally. If you look at the US debt in relation to the amount of money that exists in the world as a fraction, within 20, 30 years, the US will owe more money than there are money in the world, than there is money in the world. That is a what? And I
Yeah, it's
understand
insane.
M1 and M2 and M3 are different. Like, I get that for whoever is listening to the conversation. But my point is that we seem to have gone to such an extreme extent globally, not just in the US or in Europe. We've gone to such an extreme extent where we seem to be unable to rail it in, to stop ourselves from
Yeah,
doing worse and worse and worse. That is the fundamental issue. If we could just pause and not do worse than where we are, I think we can chew through these problems and solve them one at a time.
I think we could. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime
Yeah,
soon,
that is.
but we'll live and we'll see. In the meantime, I actually wanted to ask you about the story of how you even built that financial company and
Oh,
so on.
TradeDash. Oh boy, it was late 2018. I think September or something. My friend Linus came up to me and said, "Hey, man, let's do something. I'm out of work right now, and you're just doing some consulting. Let's just create something." So we looked at a lot of different ideas. We like wrote down a list of 10, 20 different ideas and started discussing them and brainstorming. And what we realized is that, in particular, there was a lot of crypto hype, as you can imagine, around the
Oh yeah.
2017-18 era. And our ambition was to create not a crypto platform, but a financial platform for people who are getting into trading that they cannot afford a Bloomberg terminal. That's an expensive thing to do. And all they have for trading is basically some app from their broker. Like there is nothing in between these two that occupies the space. If you want to go, maybe not a professional
Yeah.
trader, but something in
Like
between.
you don't want to use a gamified thing.
I mean, you want to have a nice interface. You want to have decent functionality, the ability to track statistics, know how well you're doing relative to the market, be able to have something. So we decided to start with crypto and then add in other asset classes, mainly because crypto is open, it's easy to integrate with, and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. True.
Just it was just convenience that we started with crypto. So we did a, which is something not a lot enough entrepreneurs do today. We did a downloadable software. Most people
Okay.
put everything on a website right now. It's webware. We did software, like an actually downloadable software you download and install on your computer. It was meant for people that are sitting at their desktop. There was no mobile version, there was no nothing. So we had a very clear target audience. People who
Okay.
want to take trading seriously, but not seriously enough to pay for a Bloomberg terminal and need more functionality than the existing, broker apps. So we started integrating with like crypto exchanges with using their APIs and hooks and whatnot. Aggregated everything into one interface. It was a slick, clean interface, very, very snappy, very instant feedback. We built the whole prototype in like 2 months. We put it out. We got some feedback. We reiterated on it in month 3. After 3 months, we started getting thousands of signups. we
Wow.
clearly we clearly
Yeah,
hit home. Like it was,
yeah,
we
you hit the
found a
vein.
product
Okay.
market fit. We clearly put our finger on an actual problem. So we kept working on it, and what we realized is that we can extend the exchanges with functionalities they themselves can't have. For example, if you're on a crypto exchange today, you can make a limit order or a market order.
Yeah.
Like either
Back
put
then.
an order on the order book or instantly buy or sell whatever it is on the order book. Well, there are things that don't exist even in the big exchanges application. For example, let's say you want to make a staggered order. 10%, let's say you have $1,000 you want to invest. You want to 10% of it you want to buy at 100, 10% 110, 10% of your total at 120. So you want to average into the market. Such a
Yeah.
functionality doesn't exist, or at least at the time didn't exist in a lot of exchanges. We just built it on top of it. We basically take your one order through the interface and we split into multiple orders and place it
Yeah.
on the order book. Small, easy features to build like that. You just take the order divided by 10 if you want to make 10 orders, and
Yeah.
each one
Yeah.
is a tenth. Like it's so easy to build. But with the addition of charting, with the addition of some helpful sort of integrations, it became such a powerful tool for those that are using that they couldn't anymore trade without it. Because once you use it, you're like, I don't want to go back to not using it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we hit home on a lot of these features. We try to do sort of social trading where you follow other traders and maybe invest in their investment. We wanted to like grow that platform in that direction, then integrate stocks and integrate options. We never got there actually, because 9 months after we started the company, we had tens of thousands of users. We had handled billions of dollars in transactions within 9 months from the idea's inception, not even from code. Started the idea in September. By June next year, we had I want to say three, but it was more like two serious acquisition offers on the table.
Nice.
We ended up selling the company mainly because we have been running it on personal funding, like from our own pockets. Uh, the net, this is going to shock you. The total cost for running the service was less than $100 a month in terms of
Wow.
hardware. Rented
Wow.
VPSs from DigitalOcean.
That's insane. I
And
actually knew this. You told me about this, but that's still insane to
I
remember
mean, it
it.
was $100 a month in infrastructure, the cost of our labor that we put in. But we also had to invest a lot in sort of hiring consultants and accountants and legal. Like we want to know what jurisdiction we can operate in safely, blah blah.
Yeah.
So there was a
There's a lot
lot
of
of external
that
cost.
understands.
Yeah, so we had two options. Either we take in an investment and continue the business, or sell it, because we had two acquisition offers on the table.
And
So
so
we
you,
got on. We got
Can
an
you
offer from.
disclose how much the exit was? Can you do
We
that?
can't, unfortunately, we can't
Okay,
disclose
okay.
it. I would love to. It wasn't a major. It wasn't like a hundred. Like it wasn't a big number. It was a
Was it,
medium-sized exit.
maybe you can't disclose this either, but was it enough to retire on?
It was a seven-figure dollar exit.
Okay,
It
okay.
wasn't high seven figure. It was in the lower seven figure. But again, we had only been working for like 9 months on it. So when we saw
This
this, we
is
asked
insane.
ourselves. I mean, for 9 months of work, I mean, I've never seen up to that point in my career, I'd never gotten access to that amount of capital for that little work. To be honest with you,
I would have sold it too.
I mean, it was just too good of an offer not to sell.
Yeah, yeah.
So we did. But today I sort of somewhat regret it, to be honest, because knowing what I know, like post fact, I'm like, I could have made this into a much larger business. Much, much, much larger.
Fair,
Anyway,
fair.
it
But you
is
like,
what it
this is
is.
the thing with your first exit. I don't think you have to think like that. With your first exit, I think you have to think in terms of de-risking yourself, right? Because
Exactly.
if I had $1 million on the table right now, I can think in terms of, oh, but I could 10x the company. And fair enough, maybe I could.
Yeah.
But if I take the million now, I have the million now. There's no way you can take that away from me. And like, let's assume this is a net 1 million after taxes and everything, just to keep it simple. Okay, I'm not gonna, retire lavishly and never work in my life, but I also don't have to really worry about my finances.
That was the basically the line of reasoning we had is that okay, we can go on to greener pasture after, not like this is the last thing we do. And by the way, after that, I went on to have two more exits, also smaller exit, not larger ones. So it's not like I've exited multiple companies, most of them through asset sale structure. The interesting part about that particular deal is that we got acquired by a crypto exchange, Bittrex at the time. And what they wanted to do is they were so in love with our interface, they wanted to take it and put it in their product,
Oh,
right? Because the interface was so good. I mean, technically, if you think about it, a lot of the functionalities we had were not like super technically advanced because really, like, what can you do that is super technically advanced in that space? They just lack the expertise to build something that looks that good. So this is, for the UX and UI designers out there, user experience matters. If you create products that have good user experience, people will jump on board them. And you're going to get acquisitions just purely based on how things look. They don't need to be
fair.
technically complicated. They don't need to be
Yeah, yeah.
sort of
No,
amazingly technically designed. Just make them look good, make them functional.
so this is an interesting point because it's one thing that I've been thinking about for so, like, literally for the past 3 years of my life. I've been thinking, what do I specialize in as an engineer? Because
Hmm.
I'm a very generalist guy. I've worked on React, TypeScript, Solidity, Go, all sorts of shenanigans in crypto, outside of crypto. And I always came to the question of, okay, like, what am I actually good at? When I want to pitch, for example, my now consulting services with Fleet Software, like, what's the pitch? And
Yeah.
I still never came to a real conclusion. I'm thinking that, as you pointed out, there might be some real tremendous value in sort of a combination of things, like a skill stack, as Scott Adams says. Because, and especially, I saw, have you seen when Tailwind Labs was hiring a few months ago? They offered a 275K salary for a design engineer.
No, I did not see that.
Yeah, so basically, if you're good at UI UX design, well, they already hired somebody, but if you're good at UI UX design and you also know front end engineering, full stack ish maybe, that's 275K.
I
Somebody
mean,
was
it's
willing.
rare to find someone who's good at both, man. Like it's
Yeah,
skill sets take long term to develop. It takes a long time to become a good software engineer. It takes a long time to be a good designer. So finding
true.
someone who's good at both, that's very rare.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I think it kind of goes like with what you said, where, if you can do this, if you can actually develop even, simple ish, CRUD ish type software, but you can do it really, really well, there's value in that.
I mean, most software is CRUD software. Let's be honest. All the
Yeah.
web is an interface to a database. Like
Yeah.
For all your customers know, it could be a spreadsheet in the back end, not even a MySQL or whatever. They don't care. Your customer does not
Yeah.
give a shit, honestly, what your tech stack is. These are shiny things that we developers tend to tell ourselves to sort of distinguish ourselves from someone else. In reality, the situation is your customer just wants their problem solved, no
Yeah.
headache, and their information doesn't leak. That's all they care about. And if you
Yeah.
present that
I
in a
agree.
good UI way, they will pay you money.
I agree. So it's actually the same for smart contracts as well. Everybody thinks Solidity is so hard, and it is hard because it has certain foot guns, which is why you get an audit from a security researcher. But in terms of just development, it's still CRUD. You have
All of
data
it is,
structures.
yeah.
You have data structures. You have some access control, some functions like in any other language. Do
All of
you
it is
think
like that.
because this is one of those topics which I also wanted to kind of hit with you because you're super experienced in the industry compared to me and you have seen a lot of stuff. Do you like, as I said earlier, I'm trying to build like a consulting shop. Do you think it's worth it to even niche down into a specific field, or like how would you approach it?
Niching, I mean, it depends on the niche. So, okay, if you, again, I have consulted for a lot of, like I told you earlier, a lot of angel investors. I've seen a fair number of businesses come and go in front of my eyes. And when you niche down, it's an advantage in many ways due to marketability, due to what you can do with SEO, do what you can X, Y, and Z. There are some advantages to having a niche. There are some disadvantages also. So it's not like there is no right or wrong answer I can give you on this. But what I can say is that if you niche yourself into something that is not timely, if you basically go into a niche in the wrong time frame, you're going to get burned. So, for
Okay.
example, if there is no crypto hype and you go into crypto, you're going to get burned. If you go into
Yeah.
finance in a period where there is no finance hype, you're going to get burned. If you go into
I'm getting bored
AI,
right
I mean, but that's what happens, right? Because, I mean, this is something not enough of us people who deal with startups talk about is that most startups throughout the last 20 to 30 years that have come about, they're cyclical in their like boom and bust nature. You have one hype cycle, pushes up one niche all the way up to the stratosphere while everything else is stagnant. That dies and the next one comes up. Right now, it's
now.
AI, AI, AI. Honestly, it pisses me off. First of all, there is nothing called AI. It's all machine learning. We just changed the world in order to market it and make it more sexy
Yeah.
and change the AI to mean AGI. We're playing these word games, and all of this, by the way, is fundamentally based on the VC structure. I mean, we can talk about VCs if you want and how their structure functions, which I think more entrepreneurs should understand. Like, I don't think enough entrepreneurs understand how VC funds work. And if they did, they would half the decision they would make, they wouldn't make anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
we can talk about that a little bit later if you want. But the point I'm trying to
Definitely.
make is that either you ride along the wave, like there is a big wave coming, let's call it AI hype wave. Either you ride along with it, you niche into it, and you ride along with it, or you decide to do something else that is not based on the hype wave. Maybe you go broader, maybe you go into a less attractive industry, but you build it over a longer period of time. It sort of depends on your strategy and your time frame. Just to give you a concrete example to question what you should do with your consulting agency, I like it all depends on the person and their economic situation. Like obviously, if you need to put food on the table today, you have
Yeah.
different requirements that someone who has money in the bank that doesn't need to put food on the money today. Like you have a longer time horizon.
Definitely.
So it's different from person to person. But what I can tell you for a fact is that if you're trying to build a consultancy agency, you have to consider what a consultancy is. And I'm pretty sure you know this, but I'm going to say it just for whomever is watching. Consultancy is a function of time. You get paid per hour you spend on your work. Here
Yeah.
is the problem. Most of the work in consultancy agencies is not actually doing the work of consultancy. Most of the work is in doing sales in order to get the client to do the work.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is time you don't get paid for.
So that's why you have a markup.
You have to have a markup. And now the
Yeah.
problem comes in. when you have an oversupply of people that are doing agencies, they're all competing, the markups dip down, and now suddenly you have to compete and start sort of the economics don't make sense anymore for
Okay.
consultancies anymore. Because you have to compete on price, push it down. And now that you pushed your price down, people are going to say, well, your service must not be good if the price is so low.
Oh yeah, they really do that.
But if you charge too much, people will go, well, this is too expensive. So,
Yeah.
like, it's tough balance. So, basically, when you're in an agency or consultancy, you're a salesperson. That's your primary function. And then you're a developer second. That is the truth of it.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. I also like. I think that you made a good point that there's like kind of like a thing where initially when there's not so many consulting shops in a business, it's all fine and dandy, and then when it gets
Mhm.
saturated, it kind of comes crashing down. Because I saw this with auditing in crypto throughout the past 2 years when it first kind of became famous due to like a few people like see Michelle, maybe you know, maybe not, maybe don't, but he made like $1 million on Code Arena. And then a few other guys like Pashrov and others became famous because they posted how much money they were making. And before you know it, a sea of software
Yeah.
engineers and people just came bashing it, including myself, by the way. And turns out there weren't so much money in auditing anymore. I got out early because I interview a lot of people and I kind of get to meet a lot of people. So I kind of saw, oh wait, I'm actually making the same amount of money as a developer, and it's only these 10, 50 guys that are making the big money.
You
Let's
have
just
yourself the bell curve, they're at the extreme end of it. That's what ends up
yeah,
happening. It's the
yeah,
same thing with Peter or Mark Lou or whomever. You have yourself. I mean, this is
yeah,
the same thing with indie hacking or the SaaS craze now. Is that you have this massive influx. People are getting laid off. They need to find some work. What do? They
yeah.
go and build a SaaS, and now you have a massive influx into the SaaS space. At the tail end of the SaaS space, you're going to end up getting some people that get rich out of it, and most people make nothing out of it. That's always the case in any hype cycle. AI
Always.
and ML. Some people are going to make some money, most people are going to make no money. That is always the case. Social media craze and hype. Some Facebook made a lot of money, most companies went bankrupt. That is always the case. You shouldn't look, in my opinion, you shouldn't look at the extremes and say, look how much money these extremes are making. I
Should
think
look
the
at the
healthiest
average.
thing to do is say, on the average, how much is
Yeah,
a person making?
I fully agree. I fully
And if
agree.
the average person is making decent salary, that's a good place to be. But if the average person is making potatoes, then that's not a good place to be. And if
I
you
fully
strike it
agree.
big, great. If you don't,
Is like even if you particularly are like super confident in your abilities and whatnot, okay, then assume you're above average. That's fine. I can go with that. I can go with
yeah.
that. But if you assume you're gonna be top 5%, you're just basically you're planning to get yourself in a whole world of hurt.
Well, the irony is, even if you're top 5%, I mean, top 5% of million people, it's not like
Yeah, it's not
it's not that big of a number. Like it depends on the overall size of the market too, and
true.
overall
True.
size of the demand. So like just because you're in top five, sometimes you need to be in the top 1% in order to make outsized returns. 5% is not even enough. So, like, it's a tough question to answer, to be honest with you, to tell you sort of what niche you should go into as an agency. But I think there is a lot of opportunities, like I said earlier, in downloadable software. I think there is a lot of opportunities in recreating ugly ass applications in a more user friendly way. If you're good at UX design, I mean, to me, a good designer, like I suck at design. Like if you see most of my products that I design myself, and I'm launching a new product now, I'm not happy with the way it looks. I just suck at it. If you're good
Yeah.
at design and UX and UI, find yourself a good developer partner and pump out 10 or 15 applications, have a month long development cycle for an idea. Develop it, put it out there, test it together with that person, in a month long iterative process. By the time you get to the 10th month, within a year, I bet you anything you would have hit at least one product that is viable.
Okay, so you would go. Obviously, you're a bit. I think you're a bit biased towards the product side of things because you
Yeah.
built products and it did work
yeah.
out. So there's
Yeah.
definitely a bit of bias,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. I don't deny that.
but there's obviously there is truth to that. That yeah, if you just build enough good product in markets
One
where
of them is going
there
to go
is
home.
demand, at some point something's gonna work.
Yeah. The,
I
the
think
issue
that's
I think the issue I think is that finding partnerships is difficult. That is actually a
right.
big problem. Say you're a good developer or you're a good designer. You want to find a partner to partner up with that is good at the things you're bad at. The issue I have most often is that, let's say you and I are talking and we want to do a business together, but some crazy idea, we want to develop it together. I don't know you, you don't know me, we don't know each other's ethos, right? Maybe you screw me over tomorrow, maybe I screw you over tomorrow. This interpersonal relationship is difficult to manage. Same
Yeah.
thing with consultancy agencies. You're my client. What if I screw you over and deliver a shit product? Or you as a client come back to me and say, well, this product wasn't as good as you promised me, do it again. The interpersonal relationships is the most difficult part to manage. But if you manage to find a good partner and stick with that partner and reiterate over and over, I am dead certain that there is plenty of opportunities out there still for people, available for people to make a boatload of money off of.
Okay, I think that's fair. So you would go more into like downloadable stuff, like desktop stuff, or even maybe self-hosted stuff.
Where no one is. Basically go where no one is right now. That's one strategy. Download who's doing do you know anyone that's doing downloadable software?
I know a few guys in self-hosted, but nobody in desktop apps. No.
Okay, why not? Everybody's using their phone, so you're thinking, I should make phone apps. No, 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 no. You have millions of people sitting on their laptop. Nobody's targeted them as a target audience. That's a huge market potential for you that no one is tapping into. That's
I
one
think
example.
I thought about this before as well, just very little thought about it. But the one thing that I liked about the model of desktop apps is basically there's I don't know how many million new MacBooks sold every year, and
There you go.
if you sell the software and it's a license, and the person buys one license, like I buy for Table Plus or whatever else I buy, when I get a new laptop in 2 years, I'll have to buy a new license.
I'll give you another interesting thing. When someone downloads your application, they rarely remove it, especially if it's good. You have
Yeah,
vendor lock-in for life. Meanwhile, if it's a website, they can just Google a different
just
alternative,
move
or
it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there is a lot more stickiness to the idea of downloadable software than there is to webware in general. That's at least from our observations. That's, I mean, download. I don't want to hamper too much on download. That's just one example, one niche,
Yeah,
one
yeah.
idea.
I think there's also a technical beauty to it because now there's no latency, and now I, as a
There you go.
user, own my data as well. There's beauty in that.
You know what sold our clients on the idea of TradeDash? It wasn't that it was, you know, the most amazing sauce out there. It was the most amazing sauce out there. I still claim it. But it wasn't what sold the users. What sold the users was the idea that when you download the software, anything that happens stays on your device. Everything is encrypted on your device.
Yeah,
So the only way anyone can get access to your account is if they literally have your machine and they have your password. Meanwhile, our main competitor at the time, you had to sign up to their web interface. If they get hacked, you're screwed.
yeah,
That gives, especially when you're dealing with finance application, that level of security gives so many people just, oh man, I don't have to worry about hacks. Holy crap. That is an amazing
it
advantage.
is.
That is miles ahead of everyone else. That
It
was the
is.
big selling point.
What other trends do you see? And actually, what do you think about the whole AI trend? Obviously, you don't like how it's marketed. That's one
I
thing.
despise how it's marketed.
But do you think it's going to be even more life changing than it's already been?
Dude, this is a conversation I could probably go on for 2 hours. We can talk about computational complexity, PMP, heuristic solutions, and deterministic functions. We can go in many different directions. But instead of doing that, I'll just tell you this. It all comes down to accuracy of the model. Everything at the end
Okay.
of the day comes down to the accuracy of the model. Let's take an extreme example just to highlight the point. Say you have a self driving car. If that car is 99% accurate, that means one out of every 100 decision it makes is incorrect. That means you're dead before you get out of the driveway. because
Yeah.
it's going to make the wrong decision. You're going to crash and you're going to fucking die. So the level of accuracy needed for a self-driving car is something like 99.9999999% in order for it to be acceptable
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
as
As
a
a driver.
use case, because it's a high stake use case. Now, let's take something a little bit more less stakes. Let's say you have an AI model that can read your document and search them for you. A lot of people are doing stuff like this.
Yeah. A lot of
Okay.
people are doing.
Say I'm a business owner. I integrate with your platform. I upload all my documents. Where am I uploading them? These are my business sensitive documents. I don't want to give them
Yeah.
to your server. Well, are you going to have my tax returns?
Yeah. That's problematic.
Okay, so what are we going to do? Let's make it self hosted. Okay, I now self host your model. There's a technological hurdle. I self host your model. I upload all the documents. Okay, now I use it. I want to search for something. And if the accuracy of your system is 99%, one of every 100 searches I look up are going to return nothing. Meanwhile, the document exists, but I'm going to get nothing in the result set
Yeah. Yeah.
because the model is 99% accurate on
Or
average.
even worse, you could get something wrong.
That is, I'm getting there. The thing is, the heuristic problem that people have to understand is that the main issue with machine learning and AI, now I'm going to use the term even though I hate using it. The main problem is that it's an accuracy problem. So now you have to ask yourself, if you want to deploy AI properly, you have to ask yourself, which domains is accuracy not as important in? Let me give you an example. Let's say you want to find domain names for an idea you have. That's a good application of AI because it can recommend you a bunch of names. And if
Yeah.
some one of them is incorrect, who gives a shit? It's just a domain name,
Yeah.
right?
Fair.
There is no high stakes involved that the inaccuracy of the results it can jeopardize something of higher value.
Yeah.
So the applications of AI have to be in areas where accuracy requirements is not very high, or when you're operating at an immensely large scale. Example, if you're YouTube and you're trying to filter the comment section, you can obviously not filter everyone manually. There's millions of comments a minute. You have to deploy, even if the model is less accurate, you have no other option than to deploy a less accurate
Yeah.
model but works at
True.
very fast speed. Those are
True.
the two areas where AI will fit. Every other area is going to go into the share. That's my prediction.
True, true. I think you're right in you're definitely directionally right. I'm not sure how it's going to play out. It obviously depends
I don't know
how accurate.
either. I
Like,
mean, I may
it
be
depends.
wrong. I mean, I don't know.
You could, I mean, no, definitely, and there's ways you can improve AI and have it like give better accuracy by using RAG and whatnot.
It's
Uh,
bound. The accuracy is bound is the problem.
but
It's,
yeah, there's definitely a limit. And would you really trust an AI doctor? Would you really trust an AI pilot? Obviously I know because I actually like aviation a lot, and I'm looking at airplanes every day. I want to someday buy an airplane, but
oh wow.
yeah, like a small one, not a
Listen,
like
I have friends that are in that. They do
it's
own their
beautiful.
own like small plane. It's an amazing thing. Yeah.
I actually have my discovery flight next week.
Oh, hope it goes well.
Next year I might go to school for it. But going back to the discussion, yeah, airplanes have autopilot and they use
Yeah.
it all the time and it works fine, but not when you're taking off and not when you're landing. That's when you really need the pilot to be there. Um, Flying at 30,000 feet in a straight line, yeah, I can do that.
Also, you don't need an AI either. You don't need a heuristic machine for that. You can deterministically program algorithm because look,
Yeah,
there is not a trillion flights where you are at that moment. Like the requirements are different. It's not a heuristic machine. Like the
definitely.
AI, the autopilot in an airplane is not, it has 1% chance of failing. That's not how that works. That's a
Yeah, yeah,
much
yeah.
more deterministic system than something like large language model, which are heuristic by definition. They have an error rate embedded within them that you can't escape.
I think that's fair. I think there are also applications where you can really, for example, one app which I kind of want to build just to learn more about how AI
Mhm.
works and to play with the technology is this thing which I called in my own little personal doc, a doc of weird ideas. I call it Garden Easy, and the whole idea is You download an app on your phone, you take a picture of your plant, it tells you what plant it is, how often to water it, it reminds you to water it. And that I think is a good application where there's no risk involved.
That is what it comes down to.
Yeah, yeah,
That is what it comes down to. But I can phrase it to you in a way that basically sort of encapsulates this. Mission critical things should not be done in a heuristic manner, no matter what. If you're on a mission critical, if this is important, if the life or death of a person is there, if it's something crucial to your business, you should probably not do it heuristically. Sometimes you can, most of the times you shouldn't.
I'm still thinking whether there's a world where you could just figure out how to algorithmically, how to put certain hard rules such that you can still use the AI and it might make sense in some certain situations, but you box it in and you give it certain
Yeah,
boundaries.
I think that will be the right approach. Personally, I think it will be a mixture of the two approaches that end up coming out as the winner. An example of that would be, now I don't know much about the. I was headhunted for a while back for to work for Palantir. I'm not sure how much you know about the company, but so what Palantir does is basically a mixture of the two. They use both human intelligence, like personnel and people, mixed with a bunch of AI models and whatnot.
Yeah.
That I think is the right approach because you need to have a super fast heuristic algorithm for filtering in spite of its false positive and negative, and then you need to have a human actor or some deterministic function or some judgment function that decides whether the result were accurate or sufficient, maybe redo the operation, maybe do it differently. So there is some combination of the two models that will, I think, end up becoming the winner personally, because you need to bound this heuristic output of, say,
Yeah.
LLMs into something that are into a super set of rules that are a lot more rigid, so that you can guarantee that the output makes sense.
I think you raise good concerns, and I think the people who actually work in AI and actually are actually well informed and are actually working with this stuff, and not just the influencer hype boys. I think the people who
That's
actually
what I
know
hate
what
the
they're.
most. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's what you hate, because the people who
yeah.
do know what they're talking about. I talked to this guy Andy Walters, who was a consultant with AI applications, and one of the things he said was like, okay, obviously LMs are not perfect, and but even if they don't grow much past their current abilities, and they although they probably will, but even if they don't, really the value, a huge value unlock is in figuring out how to use them, figuring out the application layer, and figuring out what data to feed into them, figuring out how to feed that data into the AI or into the LLM to so that I can use it, figuring out what sort of backstops to use, and there's all sorts of ways you can do that and technologies you can talk about there. But for example, he really thinks that the biggest unlock is in the application layer over the long term,
I
not
would
so much.
agree with him. I would agree with him that the problem is, in spite of all this AI hype and the bajillion dollars that went into it, there is no one killer app that you can point to and say, see,
Hmm.
this app right here. And that is, to me, when you have so much money going into something and there is not even one single iconic killer app that comes out of it, it's an indicative of a niche that is not really finding product market fit, at least not fast enough. Maybe it will happen in the
Yeah.
future, maybe it won't, I don't know. But there is something to be said about the lack of product market fit. I'm not saying you can't make money, I'm not saying you can't
Yeah.
build good businesses, but what I'm saying is, if you're thinking at a massive scale, that is a difficult proposition to make. I'll give you an example of something AI is good at, something I'm working on right now. And it's been done before, but I'm doing it a little bit differently. Take something like SEO keywords research.
Okay.
I mean, everybody does SEO keyword research using Ahref or SEMrush or whatever, right? Okay, you type in a keyword and you get a bunch of recommendations for other keywords. What about if you I'm publishing this a couple weeks from now, basically. I'm developing it as we speak. What if you could import a seed phrase or a domain, right? And you can get massive amounts of keywords that are related to your
Yeah.
domain of expertise. but they're phrased in such a way that was unintuitive for you to type, but intuitive for other people to type. So, in other words, you can find high search volume, low competition keyword related to your business that are not obvious to you, but maybe obvious to other people.
Yeah, I
That
fully
kind of application is great for AI because, again, it's recommendation. If it gets it wrong, who gives a shit? It's just a keyword. Ignore it, move
yeah.
on to the next keyword.
Yes, exactly. No,
The,
I agree. This is a great application for it, and I've done some SEO work for my websites before, and using AI, having AI some integrated to help with the ideation part would be really powerful. Because the way you do it right now is you go on Ahrefs, you try to come up with keyword ideas, or you look at your competitors, and you literally have to manually sift through tables and tables and
yeah.
tables of potential keywords to see if you even like them. And yes, you can filter them by certain parameters, but there's still a lot of, oh, I just gotta look at all these dumb keywords to figure out which I even like. Mm.
I mean, we could just take a simple example. Let's say you have an e commerce business that sells sunglasses. You're going to go
Yeah,
type sunglasses in one of these keyword research tools, and you're going to see the same thing everybody else sees that also sells sunglasses, that also
yeah,
types sunglasses into one of these tools. Meanwhile, you shove that keyword into an AI, it's going to give you something like eyewear, or it's going to
yeah.
give you something like goggles. All
Shades.
right, I mean, shade, yeah. So it can spit out, and because of its linguistic capabilities, it can spit out a bunch of recommendations that are unintuitive to you and you wouldn't think of, that are not linearly or deterministically aligned. That's a great application because it can give you basically broader perspective on the overall market you're in. Now, most of these keywords that are going to be outputted by it is going to be junk. Like nobody's searching for eye goggle wear 2024. There's like four searches like that in the
Yeah,
entirety of Google. But if you manage to sift through a large number of recommendations and compile it into a set of not intuitive, but clearly people are searching for that, not intuitive for you, but intuitive for other people, that becomes a powerful tool. Things like that, I think AI is very useful for.
I think so too. I think it's surprisingly well. Can you even call it creative? I don't know if you can call it creative, but
No, it's
no,
not
you can't
really. I
really.
wouldn't call it creative, but
But I think you know what I'm trying to
yeah,
say,
yeah,
where I'm trying to go
yeah,
with it.
yeah. No, I mean, there is utility. I'm not saying there is no utility in AI. Obviously, there is. It's just
No,
that you
there
have to
is.
find the right place to use it.
Really, in terms of, especially if you're trying to start a business, I think a big consideration is obviously there is utility to it, but is the utility and the value of it commensurate with the amount of money, $33 billion in the first half of this year, dumped into it by VCs on top of whatever other, like, any sort of other
Oh my
money that
god!
might come in through other
OpenAI
institutions.
losing 10 billions a year. Like, come on, man. That's such an unsustainable business.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's crazy. And let me see, because I actually have stats about both crypto and AI on here. So crypto has like $2 billion invested in projects per quarter for the past 4 or 5 quarters, and VCs basically they're dry. Like they're investing what they have left over from the hype market, from the bull market.
Yeah.
Like they barely raised $2 billion this year in terms of new money. So anything they're investing, it's past money. That's the first interesting thing which I found. Whereas in AI, you have 40 billion in 2021, 32 billion in 2022, then 37, and now 33 in just the first half. A lot of money being dumped in this.
And who's capturing that money? It's certainly not OpenAI. It's certainly not Microsoft. The one capturing it is NVIDIA.
I have no
They're
idea.
selling. They're selling you shovels. NVIDIA is selling the shovels during the gold rush. Like it's not a sustainable model. Besides, all these AI, like think about it. If all of them are trained on the same data set, eventually all of them will converge. AI is going to become a commodity product. There is not going to be a
Yeah.
difference between Llama or OpenAI. And if there is a difference, it's going to be a minute difference that's going to be good in one area, bad in another, while the other one is good at this and bad there. it's going to be a commodity product. You cannot capture value like this. You're in a commodity market at this point as OpenAI or whatever.
I
This is
agree,
not healthy.
which kind of makes sense of the outlook of the application layer is where the value is.
Exactly. But the question you have to ask yourself is, if you build your business on OpenAI and OpenAI is losing billions of dollars a year, how
That's
many years before OpenAI goes bankrupt and with it goes your business?
Yeah, that's a problem. You might want to go to, you might want to build it on Llama, which is at least open source, so you can self-host it. There's
Yes.
options. Luckily,
Yes.
luckily,
Yes.
they did a crazy business move open source in that. Like they, like not crazy, no, like not crazy because I don't think it's a bad move. Crazy as in wow.
Well, they understood something, which is that it's a commodity product. They
Yeah,
understood that it's commodity. Everybody else is trying to create like garden and like you can't go into my ecosystem. Sort of, they're trying to make the Apple move where they gate the
yeah.
ecosystem. But when you have a commodity product, you can't get the system. Like there is no difference. Everybody sit and talk about, oh my god, I tried Cloud 3.5 and it's like 3% better in this. This is just the wrong approach of thinking about these problems if you're a technologist and you have a 10-year outlook period. All of these things will converge. All of these things will be trained on the same data sets. By the way, I have a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Right now, we know that the internet is scraped and trained the models, right? What
Can you say that
happens
again?
when. Say that again?
Say that again.
I said the internet is scraped and you train the AI models on the internet's data.
Yeah.
What happens when you run out of data? You train it on synthetic data. You start
Well,
making up data and training it on it.
yeah, that's problematic.
I'll give you the actual problematic part. You, I, and everyone else go into OpenAI or Perplexity or whatever, say, hey, type me an article about this thing. The AI types an article, I copy paste it, I put it on my website. The AI scrapes it and trains itself on that data. So you have a feedback loop in where the AI is training itself on its own output.
Yeah.
You have yourself a built-in degenerative mechanism where the accuracy is going to go down rather than up at some
Yeah.
point. I'm not saying it's happening now, but I'm saying it's going to happen at some point because you have a finite amount of data, real data that you can train it on. So you can end up training it on synthetic data that is the output of its own bullshit.
It's a very, very real problem long term, which is why I think like LLMs can't really evolve indefinitely.
Exactly.
There's a limit to what they can
Exactly.
do. There's a limit, and especially because, yeah, I can imagine a whole world of hurt for the companies that build LLMs and train LLMs, precisely because either you're going to train it on shit data, which is going to make it worse, or all the other people who actually have like, real, fresh, new, human-made data, they're going to guard it. Like Reddit is,
They're trying. Yeah, they're trying.
I know a guy who builds bots for Reddit and also sells Reddit accounts to OnlyFans companies who are trying to promote their models on Reddit. It's kind of a weird business,
Hey,
and
man, if he makes money, he makes money.
I guess it does infringe on the Reddit's terms and rules, but it's not my problem.
No.
The interesting thing is that lately, in the past 6 months, Reddit is becoming increasingly tough on bots. Like even more rules. They add all sorts of like shadow roots in the
Yeah.
HTML and all sorts of things to try to stop these guys or try to stop. I don't know. Yeah, likely maybe these guys and also the scrapers who scrape them
Yeah,
for
I
their.
mean, for a good reason, right? It's one of the few sources on the internet when you can get original data.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, original might be a stretch
By
because now I
original, I mean like human created sort of data. I'm not saying original is original thought. I mean, most redditors don't have an original thought. That's a different
if you
question.
especially in the more pop culture subreddits and less so in the niche ones but in the more pop culture ones, you'd be surprised how many of these are just these guys farming them for karma because it helps them then promote the
I know.
whatever they're promoting, because some of them are promoting OnlyFans, others are promoting like shady crypto. My guy is only works with OnlyFans, but
No,
yeah,
I'm well aware of the problem. Like, even, I mean, Reddit has been a shit show for like the past 5 or 6 years, maybe even more, but it's going to get an even bigger shit show. And again, this process of enshittification where things are seemingly getting worse. I mean, it's a pessimistic note, but again, finding solutions to these problems is where value is unlocked for entrepreneurs. That's
true.
where the actual challenge. You solve one of these problems, you're going to become a billionaire. So, like, I don't know how to solve it. If I knew, I would go ahead and do it. I have no good idea, obviously, but that's where value is unlocked. So it's an opportunity more than anything to figure something out within that space, for sure.
100%. There, maybe with AI you can like the way you use AI to kind of do fraud detection. Maybe you can use it to I don't know.
Uh,
Not my circus, not my monkeys. What I
I've never
really
heard
want to
that. Not
ask
my circus, not my monkeys. I'm gonna use that.
you, didn't know that?
No, I've never heard that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna use that from now on.
American sayings at their best.
I've never heard
I
that. That's
also
good.
wanted to ask you before we wrap it up, because it's late. You probably
Sure.
want to go do your own things as well.
I
I
have
want,
nothing. I mean, we can go as long as you want. I have nothing going on. So it's up to you.
uh, I
We can
want to
go as
ask you
long as you
about.
want. I mean, I'm pretty sure you have other things to do too. But yeah.
Yeah, but I want to ask you about VC money. You
Okay.
said there's a certain dynamic to it, and in our private conversations before, I told you that that what I thought about how best to time them in terms of how to approach them to pitch them services, or well, like not VCs, how to approach startups, but the whole world of the VC money with the startups and how the cycle of fundraising works. I'd like to talk about that. I'd like to kind of get your brain on it, since obviously you've looked at a lot of that.
It's actually, like, the problem goes very deep. It goes all the way deep to the conversation we had earlier about the financial and political structures. But I don't want to take the conversation that far. It's just that I want to say, I want to start the conversation by saying, by prefacing it with, money has to be invested. There is a certain amount of money in society. Say, for example, pension funds. You pay into a pension fund so that when you get you become 65 or whatever the age of pension age is in your country, that those pension funds can pay you back for all the money you've invested in them. So
Yeah,
these pension funds have to invest their money somewhere. Most of that money goes into buying treasuries. Most of it goes into buying S&P or whatnot. But those don't give you outsized returns, right? The venture fund needs to have some, like, I don't know what the actual number is, don't quote me on this, but let's say a venture fund needs to have 7-8% growth per year in order to sustain, to meet its obligation of payouts. Some number. I don't know what the number is. So they need some outsized returns relative to the market. So what do? They take a portion of that money that they have, not just pension funds. I mean, larger institutions, financial institutions in general, they take a portion of the money that they have that they can invest and allocate it into investing in startup. Now, how do they do that? They do that with the help of VCs. You have to think about VC firms like companies, just like you and I build companies. A VC company is a company. VC companies are in competition with other VC companies for the
yeah,
same money that comes from larger institutions, private investors. If you're a doctor and have $10 million you want to invest, all these VC funds are competing for who's going to take on your 10 million and invest it for you,
yeah,
as an example. So the first point to understand about VC is that they're businesses in competition with one another. Okay. Now, if you're in competition with one another, just like a regular business, how do you compete? You can compete on price, you can
yeah,
compete on quality of
yeah.
product. Price would be the fees that are accrued by the funds. For example, when you sign up with when you give money to the VC fund will tell you, oh, our fee structure is 2 and 20. We take 2% of the asset that we're going to manage for you per
Yeah,
year, 2% per year, and whatever returns we generate, the carry, we're going to take 20% of it. I'm simplifying here greatly, but you get the point. That
yeah.
there is some fee structure. So they can lower the fees in order to entice you to come in, or they can show you a track record of good investments and say, look, we have made good investment in the past. Your money is safer with us than anyone else. Those are the two models they can compete on. Here is where the problem creeps in. If you're a VC fund and you have a fund of, I don't know, a couple $100 million asset under management, and you're going to go out and deploy it, well, you as the VC fund owner, most people think that the VC fund owner make money when the businesses they invest in grow. That's not how most money for VC fund come in. Or like, that's not how generically the money comes in. Money comes in from the fee, the 2%.
Yeah.
Because they don't need to do anything. They're making 2% on the asset under management. 2% of $100 million, 2% of $500 million.
Yeah. And
So for them, the fees accrued.
For a second, isn't that 2% per year? Yeah.
It depends on the structure. Funds are different. Generally, yes.
So then, in a standard manner, if a fund is like 6 years long, because that's kind of 6-7 years is kind of the average lifetime of a startup, then you got 6 times 2 million. That's 12.
It's a little bit different depending on how appreciated. Like it depends on how the fund structures the deal. Generally, ballpark oversimplification, you can say yes. So basically, you have to understand this. The money that comes in for the venture fund, they're invested. Of course, they want you to succeed when they invest in you. But even if you don't succeed, it's not a big deal because they still have their fees. I, as an investment fund runner, I'm still driving my Lamborghini out of the 2% I made, whether you succeed or not.
Yeah.
So there is a misalignment problem. Now, say you are someone who runs a venture fund, you're making your accrued fee per year, and that's amazing. Now, you want to make more money. Well, how do you make more money? You have to take on more clients, right? You have to take on more asset under management. You have to bring in more capital into your fund or maybe start a second fund. Well, in order to do that, you have to show some track record. Otherwise, why would anyone give you more money? You already have 500 million. Why should we give you 500 more? What have you done with the previous 500?
Yeah. Fair.
Well, how do I justify it? I go, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to invest in your Alex's startup. And I'm going to ask you to grow. I'm going to invest $3 million into your company. And I'm going to ask you to spend half of it on engineering and product development and half of it on advertising and sales and whatnot. And what we're going to do is we're not going to care about whether you make money or not right now. Fuck the profits. What we're going to care about is that we want to show that your company is growing. Now, you take that money and invest it and you purchase advertising and sales at unprofitable levels in order to grow your business on paper, on numbers. I have 10,000 users, I have 100,000 users. Okay? Why is the VC asking you this? Well, what the VC does is that they go and mark up this deal. They go, I invested $2 million into you, but now look at all this growth. So now let's raise a second round for your company. And by raising a second round for your company, I have now markup on my 2 million. My 2 million is now worth 4 million on paper because we marked up your company by 100%. All right. So I go back to my investment partners and say, look, guys, I just made 100% returns.
I didn't realize they can use unrealized returns.
I mean, obviously, because, okay, in VC funds, when is the money ever realized? Either with an exit or with an IPO. I mean, how long don't those take most of the time? I mean, do you think most companies exit or return?
No,
most companies fail. But I still can mark up your failure and say, look, this guy grew so much. They were on the right track. I am such a great investor. I turned your $1 million or $2 million investment into this company into $4, $5, $10 million in value on paper. Therefore, I'm such a good investor. Give me more money. You go and raise another $500 million and you make 2% fees on it. Now, if you do exit, if you do make money, they make 20% off of that. If you don't, they already raised a second fund based on the markup, the hypothetical markup they had on your business. That is the essence of the VC model. It's not 100%, it's an oversimplification. But that's in essence what's happening, is that the VC's incentives are not aligned with your incentive as an entrepreneur a lot of times. Not all VCs, but quite a large number of them.
I think that's a good explanation. So there's a few dynamics here that I think we need to, I was thinking about what you were talking about. One of them is that to some degree the VC kind of has to spend it or lose it. He can't not spend it.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, on the other hand, and this is something which I talked to a guy called Paul, and I'm not gonna try to butcher his last name. Um, and I'm gonna push the interview public some day soon. But he kind of explained the same thing where you as a startup, you just raised 12 months later. Like obviously the VCs encouraged you to spend it to have a high burn rate. Like
Why?
12, 18, 24 months later, you're going to have to raise again. And that's what the VC wants because, that's his argument was that, that's when the VC can buy into your company more and get even more equity. And that's one point. But also, as I think the bigger point here is that that's when the VC can increase the evaluation, which where
Look,
is where his real money is at.
keep one thing in mind. They're not investing their own money. They're investing other people's money. A
Yeah,
venture capital firm is investing other people's money. It's not that they want to buy more of your company. That is certainly true if your company is lucrative. But at the base of it, what it is that I, as a VC, I'm risking nothing. I can get a markup on my initial investment by, say, 100%, 200%, 10x markup on my investment with the use of someone else's money. Why shouldn't I do this? The incentives are misaligned significantly. That's why they tell you to grow and spend and hire. And I mean, one thing they never talk to you about is that once a company reaches 30, 40 people in size, suddenly productivity halts.
oh yeah,
Why? Because suddenly you need to have management and HR and like it becomes a bureaucratic, not institution, but it becomes a bureaucratic thing suddenly. But they always push you in that direction because they want growth. And the reason they want growth is because growth equals markup. Markup equals success on paper. Success on paper equals I can raise more money as a VC from my clients.
yeah,
So the
yeah.
incentives are misaligned. If you as a person want to take money from VCs, my biggest advice would be know who you're taking money from. First of all, it's very different if you take money from a VC that gets its money from someone else versus a VC that invests their own money. There is a big difference
True.
because that VC that invests his own money, he cares about your business because if he loses his money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you would target more so angel investors rather than actual VCs.
To me, angel investors are godsend because what they do is they roll up their sleeves, they invest their own money, they roll up their sleeves, and they actually help you. They're not invested in your on paper value growth most often. They're
They're
actually
invested in
invested in they invest in your profit because they want to grow their money. Now, not
yeah.
always, not all of them, but in general, it's a much more healthier attitude among angels than it is among VC firms.
I think that's fair. And I have two questions for you from this discussion. One of
Sure.
them is why not become a VC? Because it feels like such a cushy thing to do.
Wow. VC is a connections game. Good luck getting that, raising the capital and the money to invest.
Okay.
Number
Yeah, I
one.
think that's fair. I think that's fair. And on the
Nope.
other hand, why not make a career or a business on providing services to, as I said, VC backed startups? Because it feels like they want to spend the money, they want to give it out.
That is, we talked about downloadable software. That was one of my other suggestions, which would be target people who has a mandate to spend. These companies, the VC-backed companies, have a mandate from their venture capital firms to spend. Like they have to spend. If I raise money from a VC and don't spend it, they're going to get mad at me. That is the truth of the matter. Like I gave you this money to invest it. Why aren't you investing it?
Yeah,
Right?
fair. I mean,
You
it's
have
it's,
a
it's a
million
fair.
dollars in the bank. Why aren't you buying ads? You have $1 million in the bank. Why aren't you doing proper SEO? You have $1 million in the bank. Why aren't you getting a proper design for your app?
Yeah,
You should target companies that have mandate to spend. This is why B2B is more lucrative, but there is a problem. The sales cycle into B2B, like if I sell to a consumer, I could just, convince the consumer directly through a nice website or through an ad or something, and he just puts his credit card and buys. To convince a company to buy your product, it's a 6 months long sales process, 1 year long sales process. Have to talk with them, demo the product, listen to their concern, change their product to fit their needs. Like it's a much longer
Wow.
process, right? So B2B is more lucrative, but try to understand that it's a sales process based, sort of like an agency. Most
Yeah,
of what you're doing is sales. Most of what you're doing is not product at that point.
I think that's fair.
This
But
is the problem.
if you can get if you can get past that hurdle, it feels like it might be worth it.
If you get past that hurdle, you have yourself a cushy, nice business for life.
I think it's also interesting if you can target the VCs directly. For example, CB Insights, there's a bunch of
Mhm.
other similar companies. And I was thinking, like, my current job, we're doing kind of data engineering because we index the blockchain and we do stuff with the data about the transactions. And there is, in my mind at least, maybe not actually true, a world where VCs or investors pay you for, data, custom data on whatever they're investing in.
From my earlier experience with TradeDash, and I just launched JSON repo few months ago, and what it is basically an API service for a bunch of APIs, right? And I have a lot of experience trying to sell data. Selling data is hard. That's
Right.
why I'm pivoting JSON repo. By the way, selling data is very, very, very hard. Data is not only cheap. If you don't know how to use it, what use do you have of it? Like the way people should tackle selling into VCs or angels, or if you want to target that demographic, that's not how you target it. I have a friend, or not a friend, an acquaintance here in Stockholm. There's a startup currently on this stuff, so I'm not going to mention it. But they're building a product for that audience. But what they're doing is something different. They're doing things like KYC, know your
Okay.
customer, like legal related stuff. They're doing research related stuff. So they're designing products not for the sale of data. They're designing a product in order to help venture capitalists and help investors in general get a sort of solve for a problem that they currently have to do manually. Instead, they automate that service through some form. I'm not sure exactly how they do it. But so service automation can be sold to VCs. Selling data is very difficult, but service automation is different. Service automation, there is some space to that, but keep in mind, you don't have that many customers. Like your client base is a few thousand companies globally.
If you're targeting VCs, that is.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, depends on who you're targeting, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Okay,
mean,
that's also the
you
thing.
could target real estate investors. Like that's a good business to target.
There's a lot more of them around, yeah.
I mean, you could be a real estate investor. You may be looking to buy real estate for cash flow. Why not create an application to help real estate investors, like private people or even funds or whoever, find good deals, real estate deals, stuff like that is very, very useful.
You're right. And I like a bigger market. I like obviously having a niche, as we talked about earlier, is important because it helps differentiate. But also, I think you want to have a big market because I obviously have been trying to build a small consulting shop in crypto. And while the niche is easy to, it's easy to say I'm in this niche because it's a very well structured niche. The money is good if you can get work. It's still like the hourly rates are still pretty good as far as I've seen, but it's kind of hard to get money because obviously the crash. But also, even if it wasn't for the crash, there just aren't a lot of companies to talk to. There just aren't a lot of like people to
Yeah.
hire you. There's what, maybe a few hundred, maybe a few thousand crypto companies still active. I'm pulling this number out of my ass, out of
Yeah, no, but I get what you're trying to say. Yeah, the total client base is significantly less than yeah,
and
this
it's
market.
like, because I've talked to this ex coworker of mine who used to do business development and sales for a San Francisco startup in banking many years ago, and he explained to me, like, he walked me through what he was doing for sales to kind of help me out. But then he made a good point in that you can't just blast people like I did, Alex, because you have like 1,000 people to talk to. If you're gonna blast them, you're gonna be done in a week, and then what are you gonna do? It's a different game, and
That's a
it's I
sales cycle I was talking about, 6 to 12 month sales cycle.
yeah, it's a harder game. And so this is also part of why I'm now looking at AI, because aside from it seeing more money from VCs, which makes me think, okay, people are hiring. People are hiring because they have money to spend. There's also the aspect of you could do AI in a lot of companies. You like there are applications for AI in SaaS. There are applications for AI in SEO. There are applications for AI in a construction company, even as I've recently learned yesterday. Um,
Yeah.
so it's a bigger market.
I mean, there is no doubt about it. The question is, can you find the right product market fit? Can you find the right idea and have it connect with the correct audience? I see a lot of people doing AI, and what they do is something like, I don't know, man, generate cool pictures with the help of X, blah, blah, blah. All right, man. I mean,
Yeah,
some people are going to make money off of that. Sure, but like how many custom image generators can we have? Like, don't waste your time on
no, that's
things that are not financially. There's something wrong about that mentality. Peter did this with photo AI, I'm gonna go and do it also with my. That
no,
is
that's
not the
not
right
true.
attitude to have.
That's definitely.
Identify a problem and try to solve for it instead.
I fully agree. Let's wrap it up. We're
Oh,
in 1 hour and 40 minutes. I took a
oh
lot of your
shit,
time.
really?
Yeah, time passes quick.
Holy crap, it's 8 p.m. I didn't even notice.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Yes. Thank you for coming.
Oh man, it was fun. I always love talking to people, so thank you for having me.
Me too. Hey, I hope you like this episode. I hope you learned a few interesting things about how VC money works and how you can kind of use that to your advantage, or at least try to use it. Give me a follow. Like, you can go to my channel. Obviously, you watch this whole thing. You probably like it, hopefully. If you don't like it, comment, tell me why it's shit. I might try to improve it. But, go to my channel. You can follow me. You can watch my other videos. I have a lot of interviews in the pipeline. You don't see them right now, but by the time you're gonna see this video, I'm gonna have like 4 or 5 other interviews in here. Yeah. Give me a follow. It helps. Thanks.